always think of God and our ancestors are also watching us all the time. And so even if people are not physically watching, besides Zao, like there's all the Jews that are in history have always watched us, are watching us who have passed, and they're appreciating us in this podcast that we're doing or
I
this
hope so. They take
video.
partake in podcasts, you think?
Well, I think that yeah, all their spirits that are left after they've passed, or parts of them that are still left, and they're just enjoying all the rest of us who are still living, as well as maybe they're. That's my weird cosmology. So I'm just thinking that every Jew that's ever lived is seeing us making these Haggadahs out of our history into this new way, and they're loving it. They're enjoying. They're like, oh my gosh, look at our ancestors doing this. So that's
I,
how I'll start this session by saying that even if there's not a lot of people on it right now, they're enjoying what we're doing. Does it make any sense? All the people that have
I
passed.
accept it. I accept your positivity and your cosmic flow. I appreciate it. All right, let's
We'll
turn this
begin.
mother out, as they
All
say.
right. Um, say first is like you started with the emoji Haggadah in 2019. That was your first Haggadah, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So let me
And
just for the viewers,
put
I've
it on the
got this
screen. Yeah,
whole.
I have a copy here too.
I
Yeah.
realize, by the
Yeah.
way, you have to hold it close to your face when you've got a virtual
Yeah.
background. Okay,
True. So we have these
here
two.
they
And
are.
so this one was the first one, and it was a huge success. And I think probably because it was a lot of kids. I think a lot of kids like loved the emojis. And so I was wondering, when you saw that tweet from Valerie Levin, you talk about introduction, like why has anyone made a dad joke Haggadah? Do you think you seized upon that particular idea because it was so good for kids potentially? Like every kid loves these kind of dad jokes, these knock knock jokes, these we're going to call them not knock knock jokes, but these kind of yeah. What made you seize upon the idea more specifically? Yeah,
So obviously, because I've written so many previously, I'm always looking for the next idea, whatever it might be.
yeah,
And people obviously, and the same thing must be for you. Just like comedians, people always probably say to them, "Oh, I've got material for you. I've got something you think is funny," right? So you try to pay
yeah.
attention to these things, and some of them are going to make sense, and some of them are not. So basically, when people come up to me and go, "I have a Haggadah idea for you," so my first question always is, "Okay, thank you. Tell me what the four questions looks like." Chad Gadya, and Shvo Chamascha, pour out thy wrath. And then we can go from there, I suppose. Also, I need to know who the God figure is, who the deity is that's freeing somebody from something,
So it's
right?
dad here.
It's right. So no, no. In this case, yes, it's that's the Overlord, right? In my Star Wars Haggadah, it's the Force. In the Festivus Haggadah, it's Frank Costanza,
Yeah.
and so forth and so on. Um, so when I saw, and sometimes it doesn't really work. Like somebody said to me, the Squid Games Haggadah, and I'm like, okay, well, what am I? How's this work? How's this work?
Oh, right. Yeah, I haven't seen that show, so I have no idea honestly.
Oh,
But
so
yeah,
go
yeah.
ahead and binge.
Okay, all
It's good
right.
stuff, but I don't know if it translates well
Yeah,
into pages of a Haggadah. But when I saw Valerie Levin's post, so for people viewing this podcast, basically I was just minding my own business one day, and
yeah.
this lady named Valerie Levin, who happens to live in my neighborhood, posts, "How come the dad jokes Haggadah doesn't exist?"
Oh, so you know her personally. She's
No,
like a
I
friend.
didn't know her
Oh,
personally at the
oh,
time.
you don't know her
No,
personally. Oh, wow. Okay.
she was just a random person in the universe, and she just posted it. And the next thing
Wow.
I know, half a dozen friends of mine tagged me, and they said, there you go. This is your next Haggadah."
Oh man,
And I
that's so
looked at it and I
funny.
was like, well, I think you're all correct. You're
Oh
absolutely
wow.
right. This is my next
Wow.
project. So, okay,
Yeah.
let's get going. And that's just what I did. It was the first idea that ever was like, boom, we're off to the races.
Huh. First,
Immediately upon recommendation, boom,
just
we're
what just did
flying with
it.
the idea.
Yeah. So I also noticed in the introduction, you assembled a super team to help source jokes, and then you said this was the first time you ever told them the name of it before you started working with it. Have you made it like a sounding board in the past, and how is it different this time? And how does that work for you to work with the team like
Well, I've become less arrogant over time, the more success I've had.
that?
And I realize that it takes a village, right? I
Yeah.
I try to be funny. I try to be funny. Every comedian does this. They kill themselves with new material in front of harsh crowds. This is what New York City comedy clubs are for. You'll see the most famous celebrities who you pay $500 a ticket to go see, go to like the Comedy Cellar and get slaughtered. because they got to test the material somewhere and you can't test it on a big stage, right? So that's the humbling experience of trying to be funny. And then,
Yeah.
so in my case, so I try to be as funny as possible, just like you try to be as funny as possible. But I stopped thinking at some point that I am the wizard and the, be all end all of what's funny. So I decided with the Star Wars Haggadah, this was the first one that I completely crowdsourced
Oh,
because
okay, cool.
because I wanted to know, is it funny? Is it good? What do you all think? I tried to perfect it. I didn't want to think that I'm so full of myself that I think, no, I'm the arbiter of what's funny and I will decide. So I humbled myself and I started crowdsourcing. So I crowdsourced for that one, and I certainly crowdsourced for the dad jokes because the dad jokes, if you ever read any joke book of any kind, including dad jokes, they're
Yeah.
filled with average, not so funny, and like 10% is funny, but I really wanted it all to be hilarious. Like I wanted it to be the most well curated jokes you've ever read. And
Yeah.
and I needed the soundboard for it. And I spun them off my wife and kids and I drove them crazy and hopefully the cream rose to the top. Um,
Yeah. I
so
think I think there's just some really funny stuff. Yeah, I was gonna say, um, so there's different categories, which was I thought was fascinating. You broke down these categories. Is that was that actually the real category breakdown, or did you just come up with funny numbers? Because it was you said 652 jokes
yes.
into seven categories, such as 43% multi-source raw jokes in the original form, 20% reworded jokes, and 7% derived from my imagination. Could you point out some specifics from each of those three categories? Like what
Oh
were some of the
boy,
ones that were,
I'll have to reference.
reworded, for instance, for maximizing the funny you say, and what were some of your own?
Um,
And yeah, I'm curious kind of this heated hear the differences between those. Yeah.
well, so one of the categories that I specific, and I'll try to find it as I flip through these pages, but church signs are hilarious. Right? They're hilarious. And I looked at, the funniest church signs you could find, and I tried to reformat them into something Passover related. And I was
Hmm.
pretty successful on many of those. Some of them were just like screaming to be included because they're just so good. I'd have to really
Well, yeah, I would. Yeah, I also say that on page 59, I mean, I was just blown away by
59.
the actual Passover jokes. I thought that they were so funny. Like, what kind of shoes did the Egyptians wear during the plague of frogs? Open toed. Just that kind of pun was really funny. I also really like this one. And what Xbox game was inspired by a plague? Halo. So were those two, for instance, like which of those were? What categories those two fall in? If you have a memory of those.
Okay, so let's see. So Open Toad was so that was one of the ones that I found in its original form. That's just funny on the face of it, period.
Yeah. So you find that on like Reddit or Google? Like how do you
Yeah,
find it?
You just Google any. I mean, just
Google
Google
it.
jokes, Google dad jokes.
Passover dad jokes.
Yeah, and
Okay.
so Passover dad jokes is limited. Then you got to go for jokes. Then you got to look for knock knock jokes. Then the church signs, like I mentioned. And
Yeah.
I found a website called upjoke.com, and
Cool.
it's kind of a reputation website. You have words that are categories, and people make their best puns with that word, and people vote. So
Ah.
the funniest float to the top, just like the way that I was writing, I was looking for ways to make things float to the top. And that website was like a mind meld because that was operating in very much the same way. I just want to
Wow.
say I just want to say thank you for pointing out this page because it was the page I worked hardest on. It's the
I thought it was incredible. Yeah, it really stood out
Yeah,
to me as like a really, really, really funny page. There's another one on that page. It was like, why didn't most Egyptians know about the ninth plague? They were kept in the dark. I thought that
that's
was
a simple one. That's actually,
really, really good. Yeah, it's simple, but it's just so true to, yeah. I guess that's the other question I had. So those were like very specifically Passover related. And then there were some other ones, other pages, like, like a page 103. And it's like a section about kings, which to me felt like it was related because we're talking about a pharaoh who's like a ruler, he's like a despot, he's a dictator. And so we're kind of thinking about what kings or pharaohs are like over time. Was there like how do you determine what goes into the book, what doesn't? Like so that to me, were you thinking like, yeah, is that where you're thinking that's a king? I'm gonna make that a king page, a pharaoh related page. Like how do you determine what goes in, what doesn't go in is my question.
what I did was basically I followed whatever the Hebrew text was on the one side of the page. All right, there it is.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I tried to theme it to what was on the opposite page to the best of my ability.
Okay.
Sometimes it was a stretch, but most of the time it was spot on. The
Yeah.
specific topics are discussed. Um, the blessing at the end of the meal was all about food, and there's just a million dad joke food.
Food jokes.
I
Yeah.
just had food jokes, and then there was the section at the end, who knows one? So I tried to find as many jokes as I could for the number one, the number two, the three.
Numbers. Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
kept
That's smart. Yeah.
just kept going with that, and yeah. So I that was the difficult part. It was finding jokes is easy. There's a lot of good material out there. Pairing it up with the text on the side, that was
Right.
the hard part. That's where I stressed myself
Yeah.
out.
And that's where you excel. I think you have this really strong weave between the two, you know. So do most people in your community who read this book, are they reading the Hebrew on the left? Like how does the book function for you in the best possible way at an actual Seder table? Like how does it function at your Seder table? How would you like it to function at other people's Seder tables?
So thanks for asking that question. So because I do have an ideal and an image, and I think I know some people who actually use it the way I would like it. So
Yeah.
first of all, I tell everybody, go ahead and spill grape juice all over the thing. You're not offending me. You're not losing your money or your investment. Go ahead, make sure it's used.
Yeah,
I'm connected to it in the force. I will feel the spill and just be happy that it's being used. Um,
for
so
sure.
so my Haggadot all have the Haggadah text on the side, so it's a practical use Haggadah. So I wouldn't mind if the leader of the Seder is sitting there reading from the left, and the entire rest of the family is reading all the material on the right, and everyone is trying to instruct and entertain each other, and that's the ideal. So each of the Haggadahs I've written, they're all targeting a niche crowd, right? So the
Sure.
Emoji Haggadah specifically, 8 to 12-year-old girls. That's that's the target market for that. They read text like the ancients read hieroglyphics. That's just it's a natural feel for it. That's who is targeted for it. Star Wars is
Yeah,
obviously for my generation of Gen X. Shakespeare is for literature majors, but dad jokes is everyone. It's for everyone, which
sure.
which makes me worried about what I'm going to think of next. Can I go niche again, or do I have to think of something universal again? We'll worry about that until somebody posts something, and then I get tagged on that post.
I was gonna say, so you're a dad, right? You're a dad. You have kids.
Yes, and
So what do your kids think of your Haggadahs? This one, but other ones, like what are your different age kids, and you said boys and girls, like what do they think of your Haggadahs? Haggadahs.
so first of all, I got girl, boy, boy, 19, 17, 14. That's what I've been blessed with. Bunch of good kids.
Amazing.
They don't read them, but they're entertained by the fact that their dad writes them and does
Yeah,
talks and signs
yeah,
them and sometimes goes to schools. And
cool.
they're at book sales in their little universes. So they're amused by the fact that I do it. But they haven't really sat down to fully enjoy. Uh,
Do you read them to them at the Seder though? Like are they have to kind of experience it through you and when you lead the Seder?
I try to do it until they roll their eyes. And by the way, for the record, just in case you haven't seen my t-shirt, this is
Yeah. Dad
required.
jokes are hot. Oh wow.
There it is. There, that joke. So
Yeah.
yeah, they bought it for me last Father's Day. So there you go.
Amazing.
So
Amazing.
yeah, so they're just amused. The dad jokes are gonna may come in use. I think it's going to be used differently because I think it's actually amusing, and they might want to use it. So that remains to be seen. I'll find out. Where are we? 2 months away from
All right.
Passover.
Yeah. Um, so we're what I guess kind of going back to the other books for a bit,
Yeah.
I think we talked about the emoji I got it briefly, but you know, was your goal like to make something for you said just for girls of a certain age? Was that your thinking and is I want to make it for them or were you just I like emojis? Like so what was your were you really thinking in that targeted way? What made you do that one
No,
to
so
start
that
it all
was
off?
that was completely an accident. I didn't set myself down this path with any intent. It just happened organically. And
Yeah.
so I have an origin story. So basically, one Purim, we all decided to dress up as emojis.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
And I forget what everyone else was, but my wife was the poop emoji because she's a great sport. So for the bag of candy that we give out to our friends and neighbors, we tried to theme it also with emoji stuff, and I wanted to put in a little note of, who they received the little bag from.
Yeah.
I thought, you know what? Let's see, we're working on an emoji theme. So what I did was I converted Megillat Esther, which we read on Purim, into emoji. I summarized each of the 10 chapters into
Oh,
emoji
so you did
form.
it originally as a Megillah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Oh, I didn't know that.
And when I was done, I was completely amused. This was 2017, by the way. I was completely amused. I looked at it and I was like, can I actually convert this into something that people might actually read? And I knew the answer wasn't Megillat Esther because that's something you speed through real fast.
Hmm.
Yeah, nobody's
Hmm.
going to take the
Okay.
time and sit down and read it. That's just not what happens. And I was like, the Siddur, the daily prayer book, and I was like, I don't. This is not the. Nobody's gonna have fun with that. And I was like, wait a second. People need a Haggadah that they might actually be amused by. So
Yeah.
why don't I do this? Why don't I take this emoji set and transfer it to the Haggadah? And so and so it took me a while. It took me about a year
Yeah.
and a half, I think, to put it all together. And then I self-published it in 2019, and it started to get some very, very interesting attention. Um, it remains, I think, I'm pretty confident that it is the only completely emoji book that exists in the world.
Oh, really? You think so? I
I
didn't know
think
that.
so.
Wow.
There are a couple of Japanese authors that have made their own emoji set to tell stories, but not
Yeah.
the familiar emoji set that's known to all of us. So I think I'm still the
Wow.
only one, which is pretty cool.
That is
So
very cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then a publisher found me and contacted me, and that's the first time it ever happened to me. I published a whole bunch of books without calling the attention of the publishing industry, and this was the first time it ever happened to me. Hey, saw your saw your emoji Haggadah. We'd like to work with you on it and mass publish it around the world. What do you think? And I was like, what do I think? I've been waiting for you all my life. What do you mean, what do I think? Yes, here's my soul, and
Yeah.
uh, and let's sign on the dotted line, and
Wow.
and then people were just enamored with it. So I'm very proud. It sits open to one of the pages in the Library of Congress, in the room before you enter the Library of Congress itself. My Haggadah is sitting there to an open page as a form of visual art, which is
Wow.
not
It's a
something you
trip,
dream
man.
about. Yeah, it's total trip. Like, sometimes you dream of certain forms of success and they come your way and you're like, yay, that's what I was hoping for. But I wasn't imagining that my book is going to sit there open in the Library of Congress. That's a kick in the head, as they say. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. That's very cool.
And then,
Um,
yeah, and then I
so
learned, yeah.
I was gonna say about the Festivus hug. Oh, you have more you want to tell about that story or
I don't know, just that, and it just so happens to be that when I show it to people, the ones that understand it immediately, as we mentioned, are 8 to 12-year-old girls.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
just
it's a
like
certain
they just pick it
decipherability
up.
that they pick it up.
Yep.
Yeah,
Everyone else
that's very
puzzles
cool.
over it. Adults like get scared of it. But that's the target market that just completely just understands it without needing an answer key or a legend or anything like that. They're just ready
And
to get it.
someday those 8 to 12 year old girls will be, 30-year-old women, and then everybody will be understanding because everybody will have come up with this generation of emojis. So your audience will continue to expand. That's
I
why
hope
the
so. I hope
the
so.
Library of Congress was like, we need this because it's going to be all we're reading in 20 more years.
Yep.
Um, so I want to talk about the Festivus Haggadah next because we have an overlap because I think I did the Yada Yada Haggadah a year before that, and then but ours are very different. So we have a different style. Like I do a script basically, as
Hmm.
if the Seinfeld characters are having their own Seder. Whereas you do, I don't know what you call it, but it's almost like a weave. You do like a weave, a really strong weave of like all the references from the show with really the text of the like you do like the left side and the right side thing. You talk about a little bit later books. Um, so yeah, well, how would you describe your formal approach to doing this the Festivus I got? Like how do you describe that for yourself? Yeah.
So what I try to do with every single one is this weave, right? As we discussed at the top, if I have an idea that I think is going to work, I have to figure out how it's going to work with all the specific sections of the Haggadah.
Yeah.
Um, and I find the fits as, sometimes it's a stretch, sometimes it's not. And I was very surprised when sitting down and visualizing the Festivus Haggadah that it flowed almost from beginning to end. And as a matter of fact, the Festivus parts of the Festivus episode are about 4.5 minutes.
Oh, wow.
So, little trivia, the episode is known as the strike because that's what's actually the major plot point in the episode.
Yeah.
Kramer has been on strike for I think 12 years, and then the
Yeah.
strike is lifted and he returns to
Right.
work. And while that's happening, Frank Costanza schleps out the pole and starts driving George crazy, and then he tells George Kramer about this holiday that he made, and Kramer says, this is scratching me right where it itches, and that's it. It's 4.5 minutes of television,
Yeah.
and I managed somehow to stretch it. And then I realized, okay, I couldn't stretch it completely. It's only 4.5 minutes of TV. So then I decided, you know what, let me just pull in the rest of everything evolving around Frank Costanza. And then there was more, and I wasn't completely done yet. So I was like, you know what, I'm just pulling in the entire Seinfeld canon, and it'll be mostly about Festivus and largely about Frank Costanza, but the rest I
Yeah.
have to fill out. So one of my goals was to reference every single episode. There's 180 episodes of Seinfeld, at least twice, which I managed to pull off.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was gonna say there's like a real like rabbinical kind of quality to the way you write, where it's like Leviticus. It's like, there's like these lists of like, references in the Festivus one, particularly like, just kind of like listing things. Do you think in those terms, like I'm gonna be like a rabbinical scholar of both Seinfeld and also Haggadah, like that, and Judaism? Like, do you think like that? Is that what you're doing?
I think so. What I'm doing basically is I'm trying to make this fun, right?
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
when I do book talks and when I do specifically the Haggadah, one of the things I claim, which is true, is that for 1,000 years it was just the Haggadah, and they threw in a little bit of artistic text, but that's all that it was. And even through
Yeah,
the 20th century, it was just this new rabbi wrote his new Haggadah with some commentary, and this new rabbi, and it's like none of this is fun. This is all scholarly. You got people dying at your Seder table, and they just can't listen to this all day.
yeah,
So this not a wall that broke, but this desire to only cater to the scholarly broke in the early 21st century. There was a book called Sammy the Spider's First Haggadah. It was like the first one ever for kids. And that was the first one that, basically said, you know what, this could be fun also. Do you want to entertain anybody else at the table? Why don't you
right.
why don't you make something a little more creative? So I was watching that.
What year was that?
I
Yeah.
think it was 2003, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Yeah.
And then there were a bunch of children's books, but nothing for teenagers until the Hogwarts Haggadah. Hogwarts
Right.
Legacy, yeah, came out in 2017, if I recall
Right.
correctly, and that really was the first one for teens. And it's hard to pull in teens to something that's just stodgy and boring. And
Yeah.
when's the food coming?
Yeah.
Sebastian Maniscalco, who I'm sure you must know, is a comedian who talks about as a non-Jew sitting down at a Seder wondering what we're reading pamphlets now. What are we
Yeah.
doing? Well, he jumps around a
Yeah.
little harder than I do, but we're reading
Yeah.
pamphlets now. You're feeding me potatoes. What? What is
Yeah, for
this?
sure.
So that's what I'm trying to do, and that's probably a bit of what you're trying to do. And I'll ask you questions about that in a few minutes. But I'm just trying to entertain. I'm trying at this point to pull in everyone. People, and I actually get that feedback, which is glorious when people email me and they go, I wasn't really successful in bringing my kids to the table. It's really difficult. But this
Yeah.
year, you got your book, and oh my God, I had this
They're
conversation
into
with
it.
my son, and we got somewhere, and it was so nice. I was like, yeah, yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. This is great.
Yeah. So do you think that is your legacy? We joke about the Guinness Book of Records, and what do you think the cultural legacy of your work is? Like, we're at this moment, like we're Jewish Americans, both of us, and we're kind of melding the two traditions together. Like, talk to me more about this cultural legacy, both in the moment of what you're doing for your audience today, but also kind of what you're leaving behind, like in the Library of Congress, in this with this work? How would you talk about it?
So we're people of the book, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be dull. It doesn't have to be, the stereotypical image of a person sitting there like this studying away. It's Do you speak any Yiddish at all, Dave? Any?
Try me on
I'm
something. Go
guessing
ahead.
no.
Yeah.
So there's a great famous expression. It's schwer zu sein ein Yid. It's difficult to be a Jew. It's hard.
Mm,
It's hard.
mm.
It's not easy. No matter which level you are in your life, whether from any swing of the pendulum of the spectrum from secular to ultra religious, it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
Especially with how we're treated on the global stage. But we can still have a little bit of fun. We can
Yeah.
still try to charm ourselves and charm our family. When things are difficult and not working, you try to inject it with a little bit of humor. We've got the best comedians in the world in our entire history. There's absolutely a reason for that. Totally a reason for that. And I'm totally vibing with that attitude. And
Yeah.
and for my kids also, I'm not just sitting there. Come on over, we'll eat carpus now. And come on over. We just got some matzah for you. No, come on, let's have some fun. I'm trying
Yeah.
to entertain you. Let's have a look at this together. And and this is actually what teachers in day schools are doing nowadays. They're trying to entertain, to pull you in. Everything to reach children now is a meme.
Right.
Absolutely
Right.
everything. So this
So
is this is
yeah,
what we're doing.
what do you think that could be one of your next book? Have you ever thought about a meme Haggadah? Haggadah? Like, have you ever thought of like what's your next book potentially? Have you thought about your next one yet?
Oh, I'm thinking about
Next
it all the
next Haggadah?
time. Ideas are
Yeah. What?
floating around big time. I can't
Yeah.
I
Can you
can't
share
nail one down.
any of the ones that you're thinking about, or
Yeah, let's see. So one recently came up, which I gave good thought, the Sherlock Holmes Haggadah.
so you think about them and you're like, well, and you kind of test them out, and if they don't work, you abandon them or something like
Yeah,
that. You
yeah.
test a lot of them. Oh
I
wow.
test I
Okay.
test them in my head the way I write in general, period, right? This is not what I
Yeah.
this is not the only thing that I write, but basically whenever I write anything, if it's an article
Right.
or even a Facebook post, first
Right.
first it's formulated in my head until it's so pregnant that it has to be written. So when I have enough ideas in my head and it's like, oh, this is going to work now, then everything I just drop it down on the page or the virtual uh, um, ones and zeros page, and bring it to life. So I've been toying with Holmes, but boy, I need a really skilled plotter because it's going to
Yeah.
have to be an actual mysterious tale. And I don't know if I have the full skills for that, but I like the idea. The idea is batting itself around in my head.
So Sherlock Holmes is potentially the one you're
Yeah.
saying.
And Squid
Yeah.
Games, like I mentioned before, Squid Games, I got it's like maybe there's a bad guy, there's an overlord. They're trying to be free, right? They're trying to get out.
True.
Maybe
Okay.
we'll fit.
All
We'll
right.
and whatever. I mean, there's something out there. There's that's gonna hit. And I got
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, for sure. I also a couple other questions. Like, if you could, I was gonna say something about like the Shakespeare one. Did you ever show it to a Shakespeare scholar? Like, I don't really know Shakespeare very well, so a lot of that's over my head. Like, do you ever show it to a Shakespeare scholar who's also Jewish and say like, "Hey, this is what I did. Like, what do you think of this?" Like, did you ever, for fun or before it was published, any of those things? Yeah.
Well, I didn't show it to a Shakespeare scholar on purpose, but it happened to find their way to some of them. So they reacted in different ways. So I got feedback. So one Shakespeare professor was entirely amused and totally
Yeah.
understood what I was doing. And another was like, you don't have your gerunds and tenses and um, Old English sentence structure correct. And I'm like, are you paying attention to what I was trying to
Wasn't very
do?
fun
I'm just
response. No.
playing. I'm
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
playing. That's all I'm playing. You have to appreciate what I was doing because just like with the Festivus Haggadah, I tried to quote every single one of Shakespeare's 37 plays at a minimum X amount of times, and I actually have a chart on how many times each of his plays is quoted. It's all the way at the end. So
Yeah.
everyone is quoted at least 5 times. So five was the minimum of every single play that gets quoted in the Shakespeare Haggadah.
It's impressive.
Pulled it off. So yeah, I like my footnoting. is something that I amuse myself with, and it seems like people appreciate that I do. It's like the little research part of it that people appreciate.
Very cool. Um, so let's see if any more questions. I actually had one other question is like, if you could time travel to one time and make a Haggadah about like something going on at that time, like could you do the coronavirus one, and you
Ah,
said that that one like no one like wants to read anymore because it was almost like it's like so much suffering was involved. But I think almost Passover is about suffering. Like we have to like pass on these stories of suffering through reading the Seder. And could you time travel to a certain time and make a Haggadah like of that era, like you did with the coronavirus one, like for about maybe a Jewish experience or something else? Like that's a question I had for you.
that's interesting. I got to think about that for a few seconds. But if I just give you a gut reaction, um, the as a writer, the greatest moment in writing history is probably the creation of the Gutenberg press. Um,
Mm,
and that's like a moment where knowledge just spread like wildfire,
yeah,
like kaboom,
yeah,
because you could, and books were went from being precious commodities that were priceless to absolutely everywhere. And that was the beginning of the Enlightenment. And I would have liked to have been around for the Enlightenment because we are no longer in the Enlightenment. But we're not going to get into a global societal discussion, but we are not. But I want to be in an age where Da Vinci exists and Michelangelo. Um, if you saw the latest Indiana Jones, it's completely enamored with Archimedes. Uh,
yeah.
Geniuses. I'm a great admirer of history's
I'll
geniuses.
say that to answer that question, to go back, I know we're transitioning to the other half hour. To answer
Yeah.
that question for myself, I would have liked to have been around during World War II for Hitler. I would have liked to have written like a really like anti-Hitler. If I was, remember I was, I would have wanted to like fight that and with through the lens of a Haggadah.
Okay.
That's,
Interesting.
yeah, like just to like take that on. So I don't know if that's
You know,
crazy to say, but
2 years ago, a Hitler Haggadah was published.
oh wow, yes,
It's
you're
such a
right, you're right.
strange thing. It's like
So what was it? What
I'm
was
not
it? Was
even
it like
sure. It's like one of those things that are like radioactive. You look at it and like, what is this exactly? Could I look at it?
yeah,
Like what that I haven't really investigated. I know it exists, now that you've motivated me, I gotta I gotta go take a look at it to see what exactly it is. But it's a strange thing. Well, I don't know. I don't know what it is. I don't know what the topic is. So that's our
yeah.
homework. Both our homework. We'll have a look.
Fight fight the pharaohs of our
Yeah.
times. Um, so yeah, we're kind of recording this as like a also kind of live, but it's re-recorded, so hopefully it'll go out there again. But
Yes.